Because Nepal Prime Minister Balendra Shah has found himself at the center of a political storm after remarks in Parliament appeared to suggest that Nepal, alongside India, had encroached on Indian territory, and the statement triggered sharp criticism from opposition parties, forcing Nepal's foreign ministry to step in with a clarification. Kathmandu says the Prime Minister was referring only to technical issues involving cross-border land use, boundary pillars and no man's land encroachments by local populations. Officials insist Nepal's formal territorial claims remain unchanged and that all outstanding disputes with India will continue to be addressed through diplomatic dialogue. And at the heart of this, boundary dispute lies the strategically important Kalapani-Lipulekh region. And this disagreement dates back to the 1816 Treaty of Sugauli, which defined the Kali River as Nepal's western boundary. However, the treaty never clearly identified the river's exact source. Nepal argues the river originates at Limpiyadhura, placing the disputed territory within Nepal. India maintains that the source lies near Kalapani, putting the area on the Indian side of the border. And joining me on this issue is Ambassador Veena Sikri, former Indian diplomat, and Professor Swaran Singh of JNU. A very good evening, Ambassador Veena Sikri and Professor Swaran Singh. Ambassador Sikri, how do you look at these statements and then the clarification coming in from the Nepali Foreign Ministry?
Prime Minister Balendra Shah had so far not made any statement in Parliament. And in fact, despite Parliament being in session, sometimes this was his first statement. So obviously it was a very keenly and long-awaited statement. And also, Prime Minister Balendra Shah had been really ruling by ordinance and really putting out a lot of ordinances. So all in all, when he made this first statement, his remarks on the encroachments by Nepal on Indian territory and encroachments by India, that created a huge furor. But basically, we know that previous prime ministers have talked about this Lipulekh-Kalapani area that you have mentioned, the Sugauli Treaty and so on. And I think the only answer is for India and Nepal to solve this bilaterally through dialogue. And the encroachments that Prime Minister Balendra Shah spoke about, that, Nepalese are also encroaching. There are such instances where, the border pillar may be not very clear or may have moved and not been, we put back in the proper place, and the no man's land has encroachments and so on. So whatever it is, these kind of differences have to be solved bilaterally through diplomatic channels and also by bilateral discussion. And the overall strength of the relationship between India and Nepal must remain unchanged. Great friendship, good neighborliness, and obviously with neighbors such differences can come up, but they should be all solved by dialogue. So I'm very glad that the Foreign Ministry of Nepal has made the statement reaffirming that this will be done completely by dialogue, bilateral dialogue, because the most disturbing part of Prime Minister Balendra Shah's statement was referring to China, referring to UK, and so on, which is of course completely unacceptable. And the Foreign Ministry of Nepal is more than aware of this. Everybody in Nepal is aware of this, and it's good that it has been reiterated. And I'm sure that from now on it will go only in the bilateral mode.
That's right. And Professor Singh, before I come to you, for the uninitiated, let's listen in to Nepalese Prime Minister Balendra Shah's statement on the border issue.
डिप्लोमेटिक रूपमा टेबल टक तपाईहरुलाई एउटा कुरा अचम्म लाग्छ होला, मैले पनि अस्ति प्रधानमन्त्री भएपछि नै थाहा पाएँ भारतले नेपालको जग्गा मात्र हैन, नेपालले पनि भारतको जग्गा धेरै ठाउँमा मिचेको रहेछ। अनि यो कुरा चाहिँ अस्ति भर्खरै थाहा पायो। त्यही भएर दुईटै देशले अध्ययन गरेर हामीले मिचेको छौं, उहाँहरुले मिच्नु भएको छ, के छ त्यसलाई चाहिँ बसेर एउटा साथीको रूपमा समाधान गर्ने चाहिँ हामीले सोच राखेका छौं।
Professor, Nepal's foreign ministry has clarified the Prime Minister's remarks, but has the damage already been done diplomatically?
There is no doubt. I think one has to see this in the whole backdrop of how India and Nepal have been dealing with each other after Prime Minister Balendra Shah has come to office. And therefore, the background makes the meaning and connotations of this comment particularly, I think, deeper than one would usually sort of lend too much credence to this. I agree with Ambassador. This was the first time he actually spoke in Parliament. And already I, on Saturday, was meeting a leading Gen Z leader of Nepal and came to know that already there is a certain amount of discomfort, not just in Parliament against the Prime Minister, but even within his own team. For example, his finance minister, foreign minister had advised him against the way he dealt with the visit of Indian Foreign Secretary, refusing to meet him, which actually ended up in visit being postponed, or before that, not giving a one-to-one audience to Indian ambassador or to any ambassador for that matter. So a certain amount of discomfort internally is already there in Balendra not willing to deal hands-on with two most important neighbors, India and China, particularly India, where most of their foreign trade transits through in that sense. So I think this is particularly that whole way Balendra individually and after becoming Prime Minister, even as Mayor, you would remember, he had urged banning Bollywood movies, raising this whole cultural nationalism issue because one film had claimed Sita to be Indian and daughter of India and so on. Likewise, I think the sense of his image of India and his image of Nepal in that sense is something that brings a certain gravitas. And if one has to be charitable, he was fundamentally talking, as you showed in your clip, of difference of perceptions. But point is, no Prime Minister of Nepal has ever in history, whether inside Parliament, outside Parliament, inside Nepal, outside Nepal, ever made that kind of mention of that kind. And therefore, Nepali Congress is demanding him to produce some kind of documentary evidence of supporting the statement that he has made in Parliament. The communists are asking that this is absolutely unacceptable and the government must explain what it means. Of course, some kind of damage limitation, as you mentioned, has been done by the Foreign Office, which also clearly showcases that the right hand doesn't know the left hand. The government itself is apparently taken off guard and out to explain and defend. I think India's response has been pretty measured on that, and therefore we are not engaging. The Foreign Office of India refused to engage directly as far as the statement is concerned, and the response was largely about the history of claims and counterclaims, and urging that doors are open and we need to continuously talk. And so basically candor, as we say, is not statesmanship, and sometimes I think that is perhaps which creates such kind of completely unexpected situations. I understand the Prime Minister must have been briefed by intelligence agencies, but should he go out and sort of speak the way he did, I think that is where across party lines, the elite, the educated, the intelligentsia, everybody in Nepal is upset with the statement, the way it has come out. So definitely they are doing some damage limitation, but it's a lesson that I think requires the Prime Minister to be a little more cautious in making statements. Now he's holding a very important position, and the fact is that the backdrop of discomfort inside his party, the fact that the statement comes on eve of his party chief Ravi Lamichhane coming to Delhi, where India is trying to still, at party level deal with each other and then engage with each other. So this unusual situation in which this Prime Minister is located and his history makes this statement, much more potentially provocative than it could have been if we forget the backdrop and we forget the situation in Nepal vis-a-vis political leadership of his party, opposition, and the Prime Minister. So I think that makes it really far more provocative, because there is a whole baggage attached to the way Balendra has looked at India, conducted himself as a young leader. And the fact that this was the first time he spoke in Parliament, one would expect a much more rigor behind the first speech. But this off-the-cuff kind of remark is something which has therefore rattled particularly Nepalese, and I think it should, apparently rattle India, but India has kept
kept it cool, and I hope that it doesn't have any bearing on the bilateral relations. But Ambassador Sikri, India has always maintained that boundary disputes must be resolved bilaterally. But how would New Delhi view Nepal bringing in the UK and China into the conversation?
No, that's completely unacceptable, absolutely unacceptable. And I think that, it's good that the Foreign Office has corrected the whole situation so quickly and put out a statement talking about completely bilateral resolution. At some point, there was even a statement from Nepal about the Mansarovar Yatra, Kailash Mansarovar Yatra, and saying, oh, it can't go through this area. But both India and China, absolutely went ahead with the that's going ahead as we speak. So I think that whether you put it down to inexperience, whether you put it down to wrong advice, very mischievous advice given by various people, I think that as far as India is concerned, we respect greatly the people of Nepal, and we respect the bilateral people-to-people relationship between India and Nepal. And I think at all times you have to remember that India has given special privileges to the people of Nepal to live in India, to work in India, to own property in India. These are very, very special, privileges that have been given. So I think that I think that it is based on these privileges that highlights how much respect and regard that India has for the people of Nepal and for maintaining a good bilateral relationship with Nepal, very special bilateral relationship with Nepal, which should really be superior to its relationship with any other country, because these kind of privileges that it has in India are not available to Nepal or to any other country in any other part of the world. So I think that this is very important, and India is more than ready to continue the dialogue with Nepal, to continue the good bilateral relation, the trade, economic, investment, water resources. It's absolutely a myriad, multifaceted relationship that we have, and we would like that to continue throughout. And of course, with Prime Minister Balendra, he's been invited to India. We hope that he will make his first visit abroad to India, and we look forward to that. And even the old practices that were there, our foreign minister, as Professor Swaran Singh correctly said, he had to postpone his visit. We hope that all these things are just, because a new person doesn't have the experience, but over time, quickly in the next few weeks, we hope that we will be back to the traditional good relations and the traditional dialogue, multifaceted dialogue at all levels between India and Nepal.
Professor Singh, I would like to ask you the same question, but in a very rephrased manner, because bringing in the UK, does it really strengthen Nepal's case or, weaken that bilateral trust that is needed to resolve this dispute?
That's another thing I was hearing as I was talking to the Gen Z leadership, that unlike past, surprisingly, American leadership is getting much more visibility in Kathmandu right now, and now invocation of United Kingdom and linking it to this being a colonial issue left over by colonial Britain and not having resolved boundary issues at that time. Now this goes clearly against India's foreign policy basic principles and axioms. All of us are aware that Prime Minister for almost 5-7 years have been repeatedly underlining need for decolonization of mind, and therefore constantly underlining how we can handle our own relationships in South Asia with each other, including relationship with Nepal, where India has constantly underlined the need for dialogue and constructive dialogue in that sense. And we also understand that the relationship with Nepal is inordinately unique in that sense. I was only last week in Dhulchura. There's a town nearby. I'm immediately forgetting the name. Dhalchura, I think, is the name of that town, which is half in Nepal and half in India. And for them, the Nepalese, across the Kali Nadi, the next nearest town, they told me, is 900 kilometers. So it's a very unusual relationship that this town has. For example, when we talk of Beti Roti Ka Rishta, that families are on both sides. So it's a very unusual relationship that India has had with Nepal. As Ambassador said, Nepalese have almost all rights in India that I have, other than maybe either fighting for a political office or electing a political officer for voting rights in that sense. So one has to appreciate that it's a very unique relationship that India and Nepal have. And, in that sense, there is no escaping that reality in that sense. So now invoking, United Kingdom to come and resolve issues between India and Nepal
It's like
is
reigniting
apparently, as I said,
our,
either a bit
reopening our
short-circuited.
colonial wounds, which is really not good for our bilateral relation. But I'm really sorry to interrupt you, Professor Swaran Singh. We've unfortunately run out of time, but thank you for your valuable insights. Ambassador Sikri, thank you for joining me on this live conversation. And as India and Nepal reiterate their commitment to dialogue, viewers, the challenge will be to ensure that history informs the conversation but does not dictate the future of a relationship that remains vital for both India and Nepal.